Well, hello everybody, thanks for coming along to the second online Secure Care Symposium that we've ran this year. It's a result of a group of academics and practitioners and researchers across the 4 nations of the United Kingdom who have been working together for a wee while now, thinking about secure care across the constituent nations and thinking about what we could do to promote secure care, support best practice and highlight some of the more recent pieces of research relevant to that area. So as I said, today is the second iteration of it. Hopefully you made it along to our first one, but if you look in the Padlet, you'll see the links and resources that were created on that day or relevant to that day that might be helpful for some background reading. And what we hope from these symposiums is to bring people from across the 4 nations and give them an opportunity to share best practice and learn from another, but also looking to partner with each other and perhaps share ideas and perhaps future collaboration and research and other initiatives. So please don't just think of this as a drive past webinar. Please interact with it as much as possible and where you think is suitable, and keep in touch with myself and indeed all the other presenters today. And whilst we're at it, you can maybe sign up to the CYCJ newsletter where you'll hear any news of talking at Symposium 3, Secure Care Symposium 3, if we get good enough feedback for that. So today we have 3 speakers who are going to be touching on different aspects of secure care, but with a recurring theme throughout it regarding the workforce. Certainly in Scotland, and I know in the other nations of the United Kingdom, there's been a focus on care more broadly, but also about how do we deliver the best possible level of care. And certainly in terms of secure care, one of the ways we can do that is by supporting those who are delivering care within the secure environment to be the best possible practitioner they can be and receive the support, supervision, the opportunity to reflect and to be trained to a high standard as possible. All 3 speakers today will touch on that in slightly different ways. There'll definitely be room for question and answers. So please use the chat function, which I'll try and monitor as we go through today. And feel free to keep in touch with the presenters subsequent to this. So first of all, we're going to have Emma, and then we're going to have a short Q&A session with Emma, and then we're going to have Caroline and Stefan, and then we're going to have Dave with a Q&A session fitted in between each of those presentations. So first of all, to present or introduce Dr. Emma Miller, who works with us here at the University of Strathclyde. She's been leading on the Talk and Hope project for a number of years now, which she will describe very shortly. But CYCJ has been very happy to support the Talk and Hope project over the past few years. And with that, I will pass over to Emma and she will talk us through the slides. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks very much, Ross, and thanks to CYCJ for hosting today. And I was already going to say, I really appreciate the continued support of CYCJ from the start of the Talk and Hope project. And so I'm going to try and rattle through what actually I was just reflecting on has been a project that started back in 2018. So we have been running for quite a long time now. And what I'm going to do, if you move on to the next slide, is just tell you a little bit about the project, where we started and how we identified the need for the project. And on the left-hand side there, you'll see all the partners for the project, which have slightly changed over time. The partners have been added to over time. But the strength of the partners has been a really important part of the project, and I would encourage you to go to our website to see the names and the roles of the people who've really contributed to the steering group over time, because they have been a key resource for this project, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. So where we started was really thinking about, I had already done work in secure care in Scotland, looking at outcomes in secure care. And there was a few of us came together in 2018 to think about, a project which to progress practice and particularly focusing on young people's voices in secure care. And so we started off there was an opportunity with the European Social Innovation Fund, if you can believe it, that was our original funder, to develop an innovation. And so we needed one key partner in the third sector, and that was initially the Good Shepherd Centre. And we decided that our innovation was going to be something around promoting more hopeful conversations with and around young people where very high risk is identified. And that was partly in secure care and partly outside. So we always had community-based partners. And I guess underneath that was this sense that when risk is identified as being high for an individual, that there's a tendency to move towards management and control of the risk. And often that's at the expense of the young person's voice. You know, that tendency that we all have when anxiety kicks in and the need to move into control mode. So how do we ensure that the young person's voice is still enabled and included? So I guess that concept as well about the importance of working in partnership was always in there too. But from the start, we had a real sense of wanting to create safe spaces for conversations to ignite and build hope with and around young people. And I should acknowledge the funding. So over time, it was initially Scottish Government and the EU. And then, of course, obviously we had Brexit, and then we had the funding from the Good Shepherd Centre in phase 2 in Scottish Government, and then Includum, third sector organisation, and Scottish Government in phase 3. So moving on to the next slide, I just want to say a tiny little bit about theory around hope. Now, when we started developing the idea about having a project about hope, we didn't really know about hope theory. In fact, none of us had really thought about hope an awful lot at all. And but we quickly came across Snyder as the key hope theorist, and writes about hope theory and rainbows in the mind. And for Snyder, hope is about setting goals, but it's not just about identifying the goals that you want to achieve. It's about identifying the pathways. How are we actually going to go about achieving those goals, and then building the motivation to work towards them, which I'm sure many people in secure care will have that embedded as part of what they do anyway, but possibly don't think about the goals in relation to hope very often. And I'll just say a tiny bit about what we found about the goal setting part of it. Was that we did find that goals are important, but it was very much in the context of the relationships of the young person. And we also found that secure care staff often tend to start with very small goals with young people who may present initially as being quite hopeless. But for staff too, there's an issue in there about, you know, the importance of goals in relation to being able to improve the practice in their organisation and how important that is. So I guess a key message there is that for both staff and young people, a sense of agency is absolutely critical in having hope. So that's a little bit about the theory, and I'm not going to say much about our methods, apart from to say that in phases 1 and 2, this is 2018 and 19, it was very important that our researcher, Catherine, was actually embedded to us an extent in the Secure Care Centre and the Good Shepherd Centre. And so she spent at least a day, sometimes quite a bit more than that, in the secure care setting, getting to know people, both the staff and the young people, becoming a familiar face. And so that meant she was enabled to develop relationships with people and kind of go with the flow of the organisation. And so there were a lot of interviews, but there was also kind of group work and just taking part in what was going on in the secure care setting in general. But the whole concept of group conversations was always really important, and we facilitated quite a lot of conversations between young people, young secure care experienced adults, and also staff and managers. And having those exchanges was where we got the really interesting learning about hope. So phases 1 and 2 were at a much earlier stage, and then of course we've all been through the pandemic, and so things kind of came to a halt for a while. We always intended to have a phase 3 where we produced the kind of toolkit or the framework, and that was delayed quite a bit, but we eventually got there. I think it was 2 years ago that we started phase 3, and there was a bit of a shift in focus because we hadn't really done that well with including family perspective, so there was more of a focus on that. But I think it's also important to say that in phase 3, because of the pandemic and what everybody had been through, there was a need to focus much more on staff well-being in that phase. And so I'll tell you a bit about how that changed the project and what we ended up producing as a result of that focus on staff. So if we move on to the next slide, what we learned, oh sorry, I'm actually out of sync with I'm moving the slides on my screen at a slightly different rate. Could we move on to the next slide again, please, which is what we learned. Thank you. So we've caught up now. So very, very quickly, just to say a little bit about the concept of hope. As I said at the beginning, hope was something that I think we all found we hadn't really thought about it before. It wasn't something that we'd really considered in relation to our work. And so I think one of the things that we noticed, there was quite a lot of skepticism about the concept of hope, and people kind of thought that hope was some kind of hippie thing or possibly might have religious connotations. So there was quite a lot of suspicion about the word hope to start with, but that really changed quite quickly, and we had some really interesting conversations about what hope means in practice, what hope means for the young people who are in secure care, and also what it means for staff. And so I'm going to share with you in the next few slides some of the quotes that we got from young people and staff. So this one, for example, was actually a member of the steering group who reflected after a while that we need to learn to sit with, and I guess before I say the quote, I should explain that one of the things that I think our understanding changed on was at the beginning maybe thinking of hope and hopelessness as being opposite from each other. But as the project evolved, we saw them as being much more connected and actually sitting closely together. So that's the context to this quote, which is that we need to learn to sit with hopelessness. It's natural as a human, and throughout life you get days where you're hopeless, you might have difficult visits, or you go through life and you need to remember that ups and downs are always going to be part of this work. And a real sense that, the fact of losing hope shouldn't lead to, a sense of feeling hopeless shouldn't lead to a sense that that was always going to be the case, and an understanding that we are all constantly moving between the two. And I guess one of the other things that came out in thinking about hope was for staff in secure care and residential care generally, a sense that some of the benefits, the impact of the work that they do, often don't materialize until much further down the line. And so that can be quite challenging to hope because you're not seeing the benefits of that relational work in the short term. And so again, that feeds into the approach, the tool that we developed at the end, which I will explain about shortly. Just before I do that, though, another couple of slides about learning. So it won't be a surprise to anyone that the importance of the relationship side of practice came through loud and strong. And so another quote here, which I think is really important, is from a secure care experienced adult who reflected back on what gave her hope in the past. And that was, I think especially at times when someone has completely given up on themselves, it's so important for someone to hold that hope for them. For me, the most helpful thing has been not just people who believe that I could have something better in my life, but also that I was capable of looking after myself and keeping myself safe and kind of putting more trust in me and helping me build up that trust in myself that I could be more responsible. And this was someone who had a very significant history of self-harm. And I guess one of the things that really struck us about that was that, it might not have been obvious to staff at the time that they were sending these signals to this young person, but very much how that changed her own sense of safety over time. So just one more slide on what we learned, and another quote is the importance of communication and understanding. And again, I know this is not new to people working in secure care, the communication support needs of many of the young people they support. But I've become slightly obsessed with the concept of understanding because I think it's so important and so neglected too often in our systems, and how important it is for any individual, actually whether it's a young person or a member of staff, to be understood for their sense of agency and therefore to have hope. And so this is a speech and language therapist who was part of our project, and I really liked what she had to say about the focus of my work with a young person is always to have a conversation about what matters to them. I can do as many assessments as I like from my agenda, but is it actually going to make a difference to what matters to them? The only way I can find that out is to have a conversation. which might need to be supported by giving them extra time to form a response. With young people who are not used to being listened to, we don't give them time, but we need to because they don't expect their opinion about themselves really matters. Decisions have quite often been taken without them being involved, and sometimes we need to find ways to support them to have that conversation. And I really like that because, you know, for Roz, what she was saying was, and she actually, in our toolkit, we have a really simple tool that Roz supplied, which is some key questions that you can have to open a conversation to find out what are the communication supports of this young person. So she also has to use really complex tools as part of her job, but the conversation was absolutely critical. Just one other thing before I go on to the toolkit itself is just to say something about hope and belief. And this was the word belief and the importance of believing came out really strongly from staff in phase 3. And, you know, at this point, we were kind of thinking those who are very sceptical that we're coming from an evangelical background they're going to really think that's where we're coming from now when we talk about belief. But actually, the link between hope and belief came through really strongly in phase 3 in the conversation with staff, that remaining hopeful was linked to belief they could make a difference to the lives of the people they support. And also for people being supported, maintaining hope meant believing a better life is possible. And so that sense of believing you can make a difference really influenced where we went to with the toolkit. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to say a tiny bit because I'm running. I think I've got a few minutes left. I'll try to be as quick as I can with the last few slides. So what we ended up producing, and this was very much based on staff again in phase 3, bearing in mind that we're very much focused on staff wellbeing, etc., was the idea of producing a hope reservoir. And the idea here was that for all of us in our roles, there will be times, days, weeks where we're feeling less hopeful. We lose a sense of belief in what we are actually contributing. Because with the best will in the world, with the best intentions in the world, sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes it's really difficult to make progress in a particular situation. And what tends to happen to people, we found, and this was at all levels, was that when people are really struggling and they're not making progress, they can quite often forget about all the successes that they've had in the past and all the things that have worked well. And so the idea from staff was to develop a hope reservoir, which was a place to store those more positive bits of feedback, those memories, those photographs, just small things that illustrate when things go well, giving hope, so that people could dip back in and remember all of that stuff and connect with it when they're feeling a bit less hopeful. Again, that bit about moving between hope and hopelessness. And so within that toolkit, we have stories, examples, photographs, and the sections are around, and I guess there's something in there as well about somewhere that staff can go to get some different ideas about things they could try when they're really struggling with a particular situation. So there's a bit around communication support and hope. There's a bit about recording. How do we record more hopefully? Participation as well. A bit about transitions, which is, as we all know, is a bit of a thorny area for secure care. A bit about hopeful leadership. How do we lead hopefully? And also when hope is harder to find, because with the best will in the world, things do go wrong and difficult things do happen. And we also have bits that it's needing updated. It's on my to-do list to go in and get the website updated, because we do have some things to add. So just acknowledge that we've lost the connection with our Twitter for the moment. But anyway, I'm going to just finish with a few thoughts, and I just wanted to, the next slide is, it's just something that I include in all my presentations just now, is I went to a session by our regulator in Scotland, SSSC, and Julie Gracie came up with this quote where she said, you know, she was talking about compassionate leadership and leadership at all levels. And what she said was, we need to remind ourselves right now, because we are all facing really challenging circumstances at the moment, is that we are all doing the best we can with what we have and know. And every time I read that, it kind of brings my shoulders down a bit, because I think we're all trying to achieve more than is humanly possible at the moment. So we are all doing the best we can with what we know, and just reminding ourselves of the importance of self-care. And then if we go on to the next slide, I'm just going to, I've got a couple more things to say, but am I okay for time, Ross? Have I got another minute or so?
You have another minute or so.
Okay, I'll try to be as quick as I can. The next slide is just an example from the CERT conference. Celsius at Strathclyde University produced a beautiful Hope Reservoir from residential care staff. We can include a link for that in the Padlet. And I'm going to skip the quote from Leslie, the occupational therapist. Do you know what, though? I am going to say about Leslie that what she said in essence, which has really stuck with me, is that despite the challenges of her job just now, the one thing that she feels she can control is how she engages with people. And I think that's true for all of us. And given the evidence about how important conversations are, that's quite important to hold on. So I'm not going to give all these reflections. I'll just pick out a couple. I do want to say that Talking Hope started with secure care. And partly what we set out to do actually was elevate some of the good practice that goes on there. And I think there's abundant evidence of amazing stuff that goes on in secure care. And we need to keep putting that out there. And I guess I'll jump straight to the last point, which is to say that next year it's my intention to get some funding to look at a next phase of Talking Hope. And speaking to young people and the partners in recent months, which we still try to stay connected now and again, I think the focus will probably move on to slightly more onto collective action and hope for staff and young people, because of what we've learned about the importance of hope, agency, voice, and working in partnership. So I think that focus on collective action is going to be really important. And I'll stop now. I've already slightly gone over my time. I do apologise.
No worries, Emma. Thank you very much for your presentation and for outlining the work that you've undertaken through Talking Hope. I'm sure there'll be lots of you with lots of questions, so please do stick them in the chat. And whilst we're waiting on some to come through, Emma, I was wondering if you could talk to us about the practical side of the toolkit. You know, what does it look like? Is it an online resource that people can use? What if they're working with people who are not insecure? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, so at the moment, the toolkit we produced from the project it's really a collection of all the learning, as well as I said, some of the photographs, the images, and the quotes, the voices of young people. But it is intended to be something that people can dip into and pick things out that they just might find useful in practice. So whether that's from a leadership perspective, whether it's a communication support. There's not huge amounts of resources there, but I guess it is intended to be a bit of a celebration of good practice. So what I think would be great though, and part of if there was to be a next phase next year, would be to develop the hope reservoirs within teams and within organisations so that people can replicate some of that stuff for themselves. And we do have a couple of examples of where that's happened, like for example with the Celsius Hope Reservoir. I mean, there is some lovely stuff in the resource that they produced a few months ago. And so yeah, I think the Hope Reservoir is something that could easily be adapted and picked up within an organisation. And actually, I think it's quite important just now to have that.
Thanks, Emma. We've got a question from Suzanne Mooney, who I know you know. She's thanking you for your presentation and posing a question of, have you wondered how she's wondering rather how you've used this model to influence secure care practice and service delivery. Has been feedback from service providers about this approach. And finally, the other question to chuck in there is about what helps staff both hold hope and the hopelessness at the same time whilst working collaboratively with young people.
Okay, there's a lot in that. I'll maybe start with a little bit about the service providers. One of the things that I do need to do is, and this will probably be early next year, is go back to our partners to say, you know, how have things progressed with embedding hope in what you're doing. When we did that before phase 3 and went back to check with people, it was quite heartening to hear that So the Good Shepherd Centre already had hope in their kind of outcomes framework. And so this project kind of added to what they were already doing. But I think they would also say, as the other partners did, that actually embedding the word hope in and the idea of hope in day-to-day practice, using the word hope already changes conversations. It's really interesting how that word hope can change things. And for a lot of young people and for practitioners, and families actually as well, we've got lots of good examples of how using the idea of hope change conversations with families. They might never have actually been asked about hope before or what their hopes are. And so even that can make a significant difference. So I've slightly lost the different strands of the question, Ross. Could you come back at me to remind me? Oh, I'm not sure what's happened. Was there also, I saw a question coming up in I can't see the chat box properly because I'm having to use my phone because of tech problems. I don't know if there was a question that came up in the chat box.
There was a few questions actually. Sorry, I'm just stepping in for the moment for that, for until we find Ross again. And sorry if I ignored something, but there was Becky Driscoll, for example, was asking or saying, thanks, Emma, for a great presentation. What do you think might be some of the implication for how secure care is commissioned and regulated?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it?
It is. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I think, you know, I'm slightly sidestepping at the moment to learning from another project. I've been doing project and eligibility criteria in Scotland because that's been reviewed for the National Care Service. And one of the things that I found most influential was work by Professor Catherine Needham and Patrick Hall. They've just produced a book on 25 years of secure care. Of social care in the UK. They're looking across the Four Nations, interestingly, given that this is a Four Nations forum as well, and asking why has social care got stuck for 25 years? And one of the explanations that she gives is the tension, which is often unspoken, between standardization and personalization or individualization. And I found that's really resonated because in a lot of the work that I've been doing, including on personal outcomes over a number of years, there are real tensions between, like the stuff I'm describing here is about the importance of promoting conversations, about safe spaces for conversations, about relationships, and the stuff that's maybe seen sometimes as being a bit hippie or a nice add-on, but is actually fundamental. And on the other side, you have the standardization, so the need to apply criteria in exactly the same way to everybody, the need to tick boxes, the need to measure. And I'm not saying that measurement's not important at all, but sometimes it eclipses the practice that we're trying to promote. And so I think that one of the helpful things about that book is that it says that what we need to be doing is to surface the fact that there are often policies contain both sides, but the contradictions aren't acknowledged. And actually, if we want to progress, we need to be surfacing those contradictions and working through them. And regulation has an important part to play in that, because I think regulators sometimes also fall into that trap of saying you must be person-centered, you must include the voices of young people, but at the same time are imposing, encouraging the use of tools and measurement approaches which don't enable those ways of working. So for me at the moment, there's something about working between those contradictions, acknowledging that the contradictions exist, and finding ways of making sure that the measurement tools and tick boxes don't keep crushing the good practices. So I'm not quite sure if that answers the question, but yeah, that's where I'm thinking just now, and that's got huge implications for this project as well.
Thank you, Emma. I'm sorry I didn't I dropped off the line for a second there, so thanks for that stepped in. I know there's some other questions in the chat, but I'm afraid we're going to have to move on from Emma's part of it. But there's some questions there from Adele and from Diana Johns, which I think are really important. So perhaps we could, once you get a chance to go to the chat, perhaps we can put you in touch with those individuals and you can follow up.
Sorry, now, sorry, can I just say I can't do anything about that just now, but more than happy to for people to drop a line afterwards. No problem at all.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Okay, next we're going to pass you over to Caroline Andow and Stefan Kleipoedszus from the University of Bournemouth, who are currently undertaking a project called Reimagining Secure, which is the exact same title as the project we have here at CYCJ. And it's a similar approach of looking at the current provision of secure care and reimagining what it could look like in a slightly different way. So as you'll see, the excitement on my face, because we're going to be talking about Lego very shortly as well. So Stefan and Caroline will be talking about how they have used that within their research. Okay, thanks very much. I'll pass you over.
Thank you. And first of all, could we go to the first slide rather than the third slide, potentially? And just generally, Ross, well done for trying to pronounce my surname. It's not the easiest of all, basically. So welcome from, at the moment, still sunny Bournemouth. We've got with me my colleague Caroline and I. We are both working on this particular project, basically. It's still not the first one. Still not the first one. If you go backwards, nope. The other, yeah.
The other backwards.
The other backwards. Right at the start.
Oh, strange that it's.
You are.
Shall we share?
Shall we share our screen probably, because it seems like you have got a wrong order of the slides. So we just. Sorry, I'm just going.
Yeah, if you could do it at your end, Dave, that'd be not Dave, sorry, Stefan, that'd be great.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, it will just be a second until I actually share and do this. Window. Right. Now you should.
Yes, we can see that.
Great, and I know I want to see you again, so I'm just doing something here. Right, here we go. That's amazing. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, me and Caroline, as I already mentioned, we're from Bournemouth University. At the moment, sunny, but apparently they are going to prepare for a really bad spell of weather, like anybody else or everybody else has. Our research that we are presenting here today is part of a larger project, actually, about reimagining social care. And we're working quite closely, or very closely, actually, with our partners at Northumbria University and Leeds Beckett University. But actually, we've got a wider network, which is, I always have to look this up, the Children's Residential Care Research Network Group, where we actually have quite a wide range of people from different countries. I think as far as New Zealand, where we hope to make a field trip at some point too. That would be amazing. So actually, what me and Caroline are looking at is very close in terms of the workforce in secure care, and that is what we're talking about here today. Our presentation really focuses on the methodology we are using, which is Lego Series Play, and Ross is very interested in that, I gather, basically, because it's, for us, a really interesting way of engaging with the staff in finding out stuff that actually we would probably not get if we actually asked direct questions, basically. What we're interested in is helping to inform recruitment strategies for secure children's homes, because there is a problem in recruiting staff for the secure overall, not in all places. And later you will hear from Dave Clarke, who probably has a slightly different picture in what he's presenting from there. But generally, we can probably agree that there is a problem in recruiting into secure care. So we are really interested in that, and we are trying to understand how working in secure actually impacts on the well-being of staff, and with that, how that then impacts on the ability to care for children and young people who are in a difficult life, generally, basically. Okay. Now, trying to move to the next slide, and now here we go. Here we go. So the first question really is, I mean, why Lego, basically? No, sorry.
What is secure?
Sorry. Now we are confused here. It's great. Nope. Okay. No, it is. Sorry. Recompose myself. That's good. It's why Lego before we actually go and start to think about why secure in the end. Lego is actually a really useful methodology. What using Lego in research, and actually I think also in terms of workforce development wider, could do is offering a different channel, a different perspective, a different access route to the way we think about certain topics. So Lego is a very tacit approach to asking questions and getting people to engage with something which is quite abstract in many aspects. And also very simplistic. We were thinking how are we engaging staff in Secure who are in a very difficult and busy workspace? How do we get them to engage in something like research when there's limited time? So we need to make best use of the time and really make it interesting for staff to attend, basically. And Lego is actually a fun way of doing this. It's a really good way of getting people to do something which is different, have fun whilst they're doing it, thereby enjoying it. And actually in itself, that probably had quite a good impact on the staff that we investigated so far. If that makes any sense. Okay, so in terms of explaining what it is, I think the first element is really that I'm not going to bore you with explaining what secure is because you probably all know what secure is. But the thing that we have as a challenge is that secure homes are really very much hidden from public view. And even those who are quite familiar with secure will probably find it difficult to really define what it is when we're talking about secure. And basically, this ambiguity and the secrecy around this and this lack of certainty sometimes makes it really, or can make it really difficult to recruit staff into secure, because it's not necessarily clear what the job actually is, and it's really hard for members from the public to go and get a good understanding. There are probably quite a lot of misconceptions around the idea of security. So in our research, what we first of all asked, well, not first of all, but what we really wanted to understand is what's the common ground of staff thinking about what is secure. And we literally asked staff to build a model of what it is like to work in secure. And we had quite a few, well, we took lots of pictures of these models, which actually in itself are not the data. What we are looking for is really the staff or the research participants talking about their models. But doing it this way actually allowed the staff to really get almost like harness the other side of their brain that you don't get when you just ask a question of like, what is it? What is secure? Because you could end up getting a definition of what is secure rather than actually the internal model of thinking about what they see and perceive as being secure. And what really wanted to find out is what is it like working in secure? And what we got is quite a lot of explanations when we talk about, for example, the model that you see on the screen. There's a lot of the information, the small details around what secure really means for the people who live it, who work in it, and have direct experience of that. Yeah, okay. So I'm handing over to Caroline now, who is talking a little bit about the popular myths. And whilst we're doing this, I will put something in the chat because we would be interested to hear from you whilst you are listening. And I'm pretty sure you can do both things at the same time. You can listen and maybe type up some ideas. We would be interested in what do you think are popular conceptions of secure children's or secure childcare?
Thank you. Hello everyone. I'm just trying to read from multiple screens, so I try and keep my focus. So you'll see on our slides, we've got some quotes. So I'm going to read those to you first, so you're not trying to read them and listen to me at the same time. But what I'm going to do is show you some of the findings that came out from our research. And these are very much initial findings as we're still in the process of the data analysis. So Stefan talked about this idea that there are popular myths surrounding secure care, and actually those can act as a barrier to people having an interest in working in these institutions. And this is a quote from one of our participants who said, "The public will often look at secure as like this little prison complex with Darth Vader guarding it and how terrible it is and all that. They see criminals who are getting, you know, away with whatever because they're allowed to have fun and they're allowed to do all of this good stuff. And actually, you know, be children, which, as we said, most of them haven't actually had the opportunity to do." So we think that this popular conception is really important, and that quote in particular reflects a common perception of secure children's homes as both prison-like, but on the other side of it, where children have almost unnecessary amounts of fun, as if they're somehow being rewarded for being bad. This doesn't fit at all with the realities of working in secure as shared by the staff that we spoke to. So actually, the staff that we spoke to emphasised the importance of secure care in terms of allowing children to be children and to be treated as children, possibly for the first time. They understood their deviant behaviours as caused by the disadvantages, challenges and traumas these children have faced in their early years, and that only in addressing these issues can we give the children the opportunity to move on. So the staff talked about granting young people the opportunity to enjoy their youth and being able to help them in terms of giving them ways to succeed. So hopefully we've got that in the chat there, and that's going on around any other kind of popular myths that you might be aware of. Slide, please. So again, just to read the quote to you first, this was about the lived experience. And I like the secure thing because you forget we probably are giving them their first home life, you know, home environment. I think like we let kids be kids again. I think that's really important. Yes, and you get them here and you do something simple like sliding on a mattress across a sports hall and they giggle like children again. It's like showing them that it's okay to be a child and you don't have to grow up. So far away from the kind of the prison terminology or conception, actually the staff spoke about these homes as safe and secure environments for children to live and grow in. And they talked about how hard they were working to create an atmosphere of fun and stability, especially because, as in this that quote, it might be the first time that a child has had a home environment. And the staff we found spoke really enthusiastically about giving children fun almost as an antidote to the traumas they've faced, which is again very different from those kind of popular conceptions. So fun as a kind of, yeah, antidote to trauma. So again, to start with the quote, the staff spoke really positively about building relationships. And actually throughout, hopefully you'll notice that most of the findings we have were really positive, which isn't necessarily what we were expecting from our past kind of professional and research experiences. So this quote says, and I think they've never really had or built meaningful relationships. And in here, they realise they've got relationships with adults that may not want anything in return for having that relationship. And they're like, oh, this is what it's like to be a kid. It gives them a chance to reflect as well. Like, actually, that wasn't okay in my life. Like these adults actually treat me really well. So we were really positively surprised by a lot of these stories about the enthusiasm, about the importance of those interpersonal relationships, and actually how much the staff spoke about how they themselves gained from those relationships. And it certainly wasn't any of the negative stories that we might have been expecting to hear. I want to explain this model before we move on, because actually it looks like a group of really angry people, and that's not actually what it's meant to represent. So this model was actually created by one of our participants to represent teamwork, and they actually only had characters with angry faces, which is why, but they are just reflecting people. It's a metaphorical build, but actually teamwork came up repeatedly as a really important concept in our research. And I should add in, when we talk about our research, we did 2 focus days with staff from a range of different secure children's homes and some open residential settings. And we went in and did a series of workshops with staff in a secure children's home in England. So we're drawing from a range of sources for this data. But yeah, teamwork was really important, and it was both important in terms of providing the right support to the children, but also in the staff supporting each other and being there to kind of hold each other up through the difficult times and celebrate the successes as well. Another key thing that came out of our research was how the staff could feel that they were making a difference through their work. So in talking about this model, so this represents the staff and the children, and just knowing that we're caring for them. We're there and giving them a safe environment to be able to be themselves and to learn. This is like the path we're leading them on, and we're giving them the tools. So like in their education, they could learn to do hairdressing, and these are the literal tools. And like we're helping them with independence, with their money, and just helping them to be a good person, and knowing that we're there for them if they need us. Because they can always, like, if they're feeling unsteady or whatnot, they've always got an opportunity to call us and just talk to us. And I hope that in itself gives you some indication of the depth of the data that we were able to get through the Lego Serious Play methodology, because I don't think you'd get that level of detail in a narrative conversation. But actually, when you ask people to build models, to talk about them and to share them, you get this deeper insight. So I'd say that the staff expressed a real sense of job satisfaction through this ability to make a difference and actually see the positive changes in the children that they're working with. Some almost spoke in terms of being privileged in their position in terms of being able to help, which was just such a wonderful thing to hear. This doesn't, for us, fit at all with those popular conceptions of what it might be like to work with these awful children in these awful homes. And actually, we think it's really important to kind of break down those barriers as part of this, improving recruitment to these homes. So my last slide on the findings, and there's a pretty common theme through all of these things, but it's really about sharing this positivity. So we spoke to one guy in the Secure Children's Home, and he was doing this as part of talking through his model. And he said, I think the most enjoyable part, again, would be like, I was a chef for years and it wasn't rewarding, it was boring and it was mind-numbing, and I really wanted a rewarding career. So for me, this is it, because I feel like I'm actually doing something, I'm helping. Then I really enjoy the positive outcomes. So when we hear lots of positive things about the children when they moved on, that they're doing well, so that's always a good thing. And then I'm about to have my first child, so I feel like it's going to make me be a better parent, so I'm at the top. So it's not just about how much they got out of working with the children, but actually the real positive benefit they felt themselves. They described it as a profoundly rewarding experience with lots of opportunities to grow and develop personally. They acknowledge that secure care is a unique and challenging environment, and what we're not trying to do is kind of gloss over the challenges that staff face in these settings, and they spoke about those things too, but they spoke about them in the sense of, we acknowledge that these things happen, but actually the positives kind of outweigh those negatives, and we feel that sharing these stories could really help in terms of people getting a better insight into what it might be like to work in secure care.
Yeah, I mean, really, because what I would be interested in, so if we are thinking about the methodology we've been using and the findings that we had, and I think they go both together, because the way we ask the questions using Lego will probably have implications of allowing people to really connect in a very different way with the way they felt about their experience. And I would like to believe it's probably a more direct connection to the experience people had when they're actually working there. So I would like to invite you, first of all, to just actually look at this model that we're showing you at the moment on the slide, and maybe give some ideas about how you would interpret this. So if you want to continue listening, we're just wrapping up this presentation, but actually it would be interesting to hear what kind of ideas for interpretations you have when you see this particular model. And whilst you're doing this, I'm just going to read out the slide or this quote in itself, because it gives us almost like an idea about the way forward in terms of helping staff in Secure to improve their well-being, and therefore the well-being for the young people they work with, help to improve the recruitment problem that a lot of places actually feel. because it's really about rebalancing these ideas about, as you put it in the chat, about secure childcare being a prison and working with deserving or undeserving young people in some shape of really in a really difficult and challenging situation, but about balancing the fact that it is a challenging work environment, but it has a lot of positives to it. So what this person was saying is, I think the rewards outweigh the challenges. But when you stood here, when someone comes in and see you and you see all this and that, you've got to get around. It can feel a bit kind of, for them, it can feel really overwhelming. They feel like they are going to be here forever, that they are not going to leave. But eventually, sort of get a bit further down the journey, and you can start to see where they are going to exit and leave. And when we say stuff were really positive, it's not about being naive about it. They talked about these small steps, but very meaningful steps, and talking also about the steps backwards that sometimes happen, which actually is a really, really interesting way of seeing the experience of working in secure. Now, for our research, basically, we found that actually the methodology of using Lego is really, really interesting in terms of using that to connect to a different perspective of working in secure. And we want to take this a little bit further, basically. Because actually it offered this really interesting depth of data, and it allowed actually the participants to be part of the overall research process and shape the future and the next steps, basically, where we have where we wanted to go. And what we found is really that working in secure can be very exciting, filled with many challenging and rewarding experiences, and actually creating and helping staff to work towards creating an environment which encourages and supports staff. It can help to foster a sense of enjoyment and satisfaction in the workplace. And I think that is a really important aspect of where, well, we need to head in terms of working towards development of the staff and recruitment, and actually sending out the message about what secure, working in secure is really like, basically. So I think I'll leave it there for that. I have some last bit that I would like you, or to invite you to do, if you have the time.
Just 1 minute, Stefan.
Yeah, that's fine. We are about to end anyway. You don't have to do it now, but really, if you have 5 minutes, basically, and you don't need to find Lego, we would really like you to build a model of something positive about secure. I'm now shifting to getting the actual, oh, nope, that's not where I wanted to go. I put it in the chat. And obviously, you're going to listen to Dave Clarke in a minute. But if you have the time to build a model of something positive about secure, or just making a comment about something positive in relation to secure, we would like to invite you to go to the Padlet. I put the chat in the link into the chat, and just upload that to there. We're just interested to hear your views about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, much appreciated.
Thank you, Stefan and Caroline. And thank you for everybody who's been putting content into the chat. We don't have any questions as such, I don't think, yet. So whilst people are thinking of which questions to ask you, maybe I could pose one that based on something you said there, which kind of resonated with me. And that certainly in Scotland, I feel that secure care plays a really an unusual role, and that it's a children's house, but it's also a place where people with mental health problems are supported. It's a place where they're educated, but it's not really a school, or it's not a traditional school, I should say. It's not a hospital. People are there because of the harm they've caused, but it's not a jail. So it's, from, I don't know if this came up at all in interviews you spoke to practitioners, but was there a sense about them not knowing what the purpose of secure was, or what role they played, or even what secure care did in society?
I'm happy to answer that one. I mean, it's a bit of a personal plug here, but I'm hoping to get a paper out quite soon. It's all about that, the nature and purpose of secure care, hospital, home. and really talking about those confusions and uncertainties around what these institutions are and what they seek to achieve. But I think going back to our data, the thing that came out more than anything from the staff was that actually it's a home, and the purpose is to give the children an experience of childhood, and that, I would say, was the dominant theme and the dominant message that was coming across. So they didn't differentiate in terms of welfare or justice, as in previous research I've done, that was a clear divide, but they spoke about the children as individuals, meeting their needs, helping them to overcome their traumas. But actually, the thing that they spoke about really positively was all the fun that they had with the children, and seeing them smile, seeing them laugh, and that being kind of how they saw their purpose.
That's great, thank you. I'll do another little plug for you, Caroline. I know your PhD was on secure care. And unfortunately, the British Library has been hacked, so you can't get onto the British Library to access any of the theses that are stored there for the time being. But maybe in a week's time, we think it's going to take a little while to be up and running. If you can go on, you can search for Caroline's PhD, which is all about the perceptions of children within secure care.
Thank you. Obviously, I can happily share it via email as well if anyone. I think 3 people have ever read it, so if anyone else wants to, that would be lovely.
Yep, well, 4 now.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you.
I've got a question from Becky, and I'll add something onto the back of it. Becky's asking, did the staff reflect on the ways in which they saw the relationship as familiar or not? And whilst you're answering that, Stefan and Caroline, can I maybe add in, you're using Lego Serious Play rather than just using Lego, and that elicits metaphor quite often. Was there anything, metaphors used perhaps to respond to this question by Becky, or other metaphors that helped you understand the perceptions of the practitioner you're speaking to?
Might, yeah.
Okay, I'll start and then you add in.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of relationships as familial, that didn't come out for me in this research. It did come out in my previous research, where some of the children would refer to the care staff as their mums and dads within that environment. But that didn't come out in this research. They didn't really, as far as I remember, talk in those terms. In terms of metaphors, we skipped that slide in our presentation. I'm not sure how, but that is a key element of Lego Serious Play. And we start by asking the participants to build a model of a duck with superpowers to work in a secure children's home, to get them used to this idea that actually they don't have to build literal representations, and they don't have to be good at Lego and particularly creative. Anything can stand as a metaphor for whatever they want. And it's really good because we got some great ducks. So we got one duck with an extending neck, so it could look above and see everything that was going on. And we had another duck that was on wheels, so it could move really quickly around the whole home. So it really gets people quite quickly into thinking of using Lego in a metaphorical way. I think Stefan's just sharing our slide now. I can't actually remember what that duck was. Can you, Stefan?
Well, I think that's really, it's, as you said, it's really important. I always said, this is not a duck. It's the story behind it, basically. And what we have here is obviously the wheels to get around, for example, really fast and be in many different places at once. And the feathers at the end is symbolizing the speed in which things can happen sometimes. Yeah, I mean, that's, for example, 2 of the things that actually were described. So it's really not about building an actual duck in there, which is gives a lot of opportunities to talk and ask questions from each other, basically. So yeah, so this is not a duck.
Thank you, Stefan. Caroline, I suppose it's a good point to make that merely picking up Lego bricks isn't the use of Lego Serious Play. There's a significant methodology behind it, tapping into a variety of different theories. But it's always good just to pick up Lego bricks anyway, for a variety of reasons.
And if I kind of just jump in there, because actually we've been talking to staff a lot about the possibility of using actually Lego with young people, which obviously can be difficult in terms of the risk assessments that one has in place. It's also not just about Lego. It is literally about using whatever is possible, whatever is available. It's about connecting with a different set of your brain rather than just asking direct questions and getting people to rationalize everything. But you could easily use things like Play-Doh, which is much less risky to use. yeah, the world is your oyster. You can think of anything that you could use to build a model, basically.
Yeah, it's a nice metaphor you just used there, Stefan. But one final question on this section before we move on to Dave is from Sally Johnson. She was asking, based on the conversations you had with practitioners, did they articulate anything about how to create a warming home environment for children that perhaps not experienced that before, but whilst not institutionalising them, as for some children that may be a rare occasion where they felt warmth, safety, security, and so on?
I think that's a difficult challenge, and I wonder if Dave might actually be able to speak a little bit more to this, given his position within practice. But in my earlier research, there was a definite tension between making an environment homely and warm, but also making sure it was safe for children at risk of self-injury. And when I spent 7 months within one institution, and I found that as the risk of self-injury increased, the environment became less homely, as all the kind of creature comforts were removed because they posed risk. So I don't know if that's something Dave might pick up later on, but I haven't got an answer, but I see it as a challenge.
And if I just chip in there very quickly, something that comes out of the data is when we talk about the popular conceptions of secure being a prison and almost like being a cold place where people are locked up in. It feels like there's a somewhat different conception of staff that they have about what security actually might mean, which is actually when you're at home, you are allowed to feel secure, which is different from you're locking people up to make others feel secure. This is about actually insecure. You have a chance for children, young people, to the first time to actually feel safe for themselves, because they're in such an environment which allows them to be safe. So I found that it's quite an interesting juxtaposition, not keeping others safe, but using that environment as giving the young people a sense of safety. I really like that, which is coming out of the data to some extent. It's our interpretation, at least.
That's great, Stefan. So, thank you, Caroline and Stefan, for your inputs. And please do look out for your article when it comes out, Caroline. We'll be happy to share it when it becomes available. So I'm going to hand you over to Dave Clarke now, who for the last 25 years has worked in a variety of different residential settings. For the last 17 of those years has been working within secure care. And he's going to talk about his role within the management of a secure care home, secure children's home within Lincolnshire, and perhaps bring a different slant to this topic of the workforce and how best to support practitioners within the secure care environment to support children. So Dave, I'll pass you over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Ross. If we can just go to the next slide, please. So when I talk about sector-wide issues, it's going to be specifically regarding England and Wales, because within England and Wales, we have the Secure Accommodation Network, which is an organisation that supports all secure children's homes in England and Wales. Scottish Secure Children's Homes used to belong to SAN, and there's a hope in the future that Scottish Secure Children's Homes will rejoin the Secure Accommodation Network. But within SAN, we have a memorandum of understanding, so we have an obligation to share all of our information. So I did the whole piece of work on recruitment and retention regarding the sector, which kind of covers this side. The rest of my slides are going to talk specifically around Lincolnshire Secure Unit, the secure unit that I am the manager of. So what are the sector-wide issues? So geography is a massive issue with house prices, compositions from other employers. We're finding that people want to, rather work at Amazon or local airports, Tesco's, etc., where salaries are very similar, but you don't have to work with the complexity of the children that my staff and other secure children's home staff have to work with on a daily basis. Staff terms and conditions. Specifically since COVID, we're finding that a lot of staff that are coming to us now and saying, I don't really want to work weekends. I don't want to work till 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. I don't want to work the shift systems that is a requirement within secure children's homes. Salaries is an issue as well. Just go back to terms and conditions. It's also about the rotas, about working every other weekend. In my children's home, secure children's home, the staff work every other weekend. In some secure children's homes, they have to work more weekends than every other weekend. Some it's 2 out of 3 weekends. Staff salaries, specifically within local authorities, used to always be better than the private sector. That's no longer the case. And as a sector, we've just done a real big piece of work on reviewing of staff salaries across all grades within secure children's homes, looking at reintroduction of weekend working allowances, secure allowances, potential retention payments, which a lot of social workers and other staff within public sector currently receive, and reviewing of staff core salary as well. The other problem is career progression. There are currently 13 secure children's homes in England and 1 in Wales, geographically very far spread. So unless you're looking at career progression within your own place of work, it's very difficult to look at being a manager somewhere else. I've been the manager of Lincolnshire Security for 17 years. A lot of the managers have been there for a long time, up until the last 3 years where we've had quite a change, but actually career progression is another issue. Just go on to the next slide, please. Yep, so within Lincolnshire Secure Unit, recruitment, I did a whole piece of research about what happens in other secure children's homes, and then kind of thought about what do we do in Lincolnshire that's different. So previous care experience, this is about other jobs within the care sector. It's not required and is at times is a hindrance. Age, it's about maturity. I employ staff at 23, 22, 23, and they're more mature than some people in their 30s, 40s. So age is not a barrier. It's, as I put, it's about life experience. Qualifications. Some homes say the staff have to have an A to C in maths and English. I'm not interested in that at all. Within every single secure children's home, we have our own school. So if I ever remember staff that really struggles with their English or their maths or any other part of their educational requirements, we get support brought in from our own school, our own teachers, and we'll do our own internal qualifications with the staff. Sometimes it can be viewed as a barrier to coming into working within secure children's homes if you've had previous personal experience of being a member of the care, a child looked after, or you've had previous experience of been involved with the courts. Again, I don't see this as an issue, providing there's no serious safeguarding concerns within that. And actually bringing some of your experiences in and your own journey can be very helpful when talking to our own children. Key thing for me is your morals and values. I take morals and values above everything else. All those other 4 things, that's the key one I'm interested in. So then we come on to relief work. Something in Lincolnshire that we do is we have staff that come in on 0-hour contracts. And it's almost a try before we buy analogy. So I'll bring staff in who have got no previous care experience, but they've got really good morals and values. And in a competitive interview, they probably wouldn't reach the benchmark for a residential care officer post. Bring them in as a relief worker, they get that opportunity to develop their knowledge and their skills, and we put a whole support package in around them. So I'm a big believer in relief work, and many of my staff, who are now my assistant managers, come in as part of start off as relief workers, and then they work their way through the various career progressions. So next slide, please. So how do we, once we get staff through the door, how do we keep them, basically? How do we retain their services? So induction, we have a specifically tailored induction package for every post within Lincolnshire Secure Unit from the bottom to the top. So every time you're looking at career progression, you'll start a new induction booklet, and there's a whole raft of things that you will be supported in. All new staff are appointed a mentor, and your mentor will be your daily person. You also appoint a supervisor, so you'll have at least monthly supervisions, but these will be increased until your induction is completed. And I've already spoken about the induction booklet. So this outline all areas needing to be covered and signed off as completed. So the staff and the mentor will sign them off, but also then it has to be final sign off by a senior manager to say, actually, we're happy that you've covered every part of that induction before you can move on to the next session. Next slide, please. So careers pathway, I think we've missed one out. Have we missed support hour? Does that come next? Okay, we've go back to the one before. Apologies. So career progression pathway. James is my current deputy manager, so he sits under me, and he keeps asking me when I'm going to retire because he wants my job. James started off as a relief worker and was a tractor driver, and I talk about James a lot when we talk about resilience, morals and values, career progression, etc. So James came to us and said, I'd like to work within Lincolnshire Secure Unit. I've got a passion for working with children. But he had absolutely no experience other than having been father to two very young children. He had no other experience of working with children within the care profession. But I really liked his eagerness to work with the children. As I already said, his morals and values. He brought a warmth. He brought ideas that he wanted to work with the children in a certain way, bring activities into the home, etc., etc. So we employed James as a relief worker. Through being a relief worker, he completed his induction program, decided that this was the right place for him. We decided he was the right person to work with our children. So he applied for a permanent residential care officer grade 1, got that, completed his QCF 3 in children and young people. So he started his training and development in knowledge of how to work with our children and building his career. Since then, he's gone on to do QCF 5 in leadership and management and lots of other courses. And now through that, he's now my deputy manager, which is great for James. But it shows you can come in, and that journey took less than 5 years. From coming into the home to being a deputy manager was less than 5 years. It's about an individual's drive. Admittedly, it's about having the opportunity to apply for posts, so you have to have vacancies. But within each level, we have a clear training plan. So I always say you can't be a manager unless we've given you the tools. So unless you've done a QCF 5 in leadership management or QCF 3, 4 in leadership management, so you need to have given the tools and the understanding behind every post that you're applying for. And I'm very big at saying, not looking insular, it's actually going out to other parts of the secure estate. Next slide, please. So support. One of the things, I'll come back to some of the questions in the chat on the reflective sessions. When you're stuck working in the secure unit, especially a busy one like Lincolnshire Secure Unit, we're 12 bedded, so we have 11 youth custody service children and 1 welfare child. And as soon as a child leaves, normally within 4 or 5 hours, we'll get another child into that bed. So for the staff, it's really difficult sometimes to stop and reflect on the work they've completed with the children. So what we do here, we do reflective sessions. So when a child is either coming to the end of their journey with us and moving on to the next part of their life, or they're well on their journey with us, we will do reflective sessions with the staff team. And we'll look at the child's journey from the time they came in. So we'll review their referral document to say, I know it's used little Jimmy. Little Jimmy was behaving in this way, doing this, this and this, taking risky drug taking behaviours, whatever. And now where is he at the moment? And one of the things that just stands out in my mind. So we recently took a 13-year-old boy going missing for long periods, hadn't been in education for a significant amount of time, risky drug taking behaviour. He's been with us about 8-10 weeks over the summer holidays, and I looked out the door and we had run sports day, and he was out doing the egg and spoon race, and he was out doing the sack race, etc. All the things you would expect children to be doing, this little boy was doing. Because why? He's in a space where he can be a little boy, and my expectations is he's a little boy at 13, and we're the parents, we're the adults, corporate parents, and we're the adults, and we expect that of our children. So we reflect on those sessions with the staff team, and actually we'll show some video footage as well from the CCTVs. And the other thing we did over the summer holidays was Taskmaster. So those that watch Taskmaster on the TV, we ran Taskmaster sessions with our children over 4 weeks, and we videoed it, and then we put a whole episode of Taskmaster starring our children together, and they watched it. So again, very childlike things, but giving children the opportunity to be children. Safe space sessions are held by our psychologist, and they reflect on if we have a significant incident, so a episode where a child might self-harm or there's a restraint, etc. It gives the staff time to explore with the psychologist, either individually or as a group, what that felt for them. So I think it's really important that staff don't take that home and it affects their mental health long term. It's about dealing with things very quickly after something has happened, giving staff a little bit of space and time to maybe to reflect in their own time, but then have somewhere where they can go and offload and talk those things through. And we have a health and wellbeing coordinator within the team, and that's just a member of staff that picks it up as additional responsibilities. And it's about setting up fun activities for the staff team, ways to celebrate the team's achievement, both collectively and individually. So over the summer, again, we did a raffle. People donate prizes, staff bought tickets, and one thing is we celebrated that way, and copies of pictures of various staff as babies, and they had to have a competition who could guess who was who. Supervision and appraisal, these need to be meaningful with the focus on how the person is feeling, not just practice matters. All our supervisions and appraisals start with, and how are you? It's the most important thing, because if you don't get that from your staff team and you don't look after your staff, how can we expect the staff to look after the children? Management support, guidance, having managers, it's open door policy. Unless my office door is only closed when I'm on meetings. Otherwise, my office door is open all the time, and I expect my managers to have exactly the same. So the staff can come and talk to us. The no big people scenario, I think, is really important. Everybody's important. Everybody has an idea, and it's about coming through and talking to us. I think that is it. So I'll just take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dave. That's great. Thank you for that presentation. No questions as such so far, although there was commentary regarding resilience amongst your staff members, and I was wondering if that is something that has been a recurring theme through the work that you've done, and is there any sort of advice you would give about how to support staff members through difficult times?
I think for me, the safe space sessions are really important, to have that opportunity to talk to the psychologist. As an authority, we have the employee support and counselling service, but I think it's about, I say to my team, we're not paid enough to take something home with us. So if you're concerned about something, you need the space to offload before you go home. So you can go home thinking, I've told a manager that, I've unloaded that, I've had the opportunity to voice my opinion, my concerns. So whether that is with a manager or we call staff in very quickly afterwards. After every incident, every member of staff has an individual debrief as well as a group debrief. So a part of that is what went well, what we're concerned about, and what will we do differently next time. And I think it's not a blame culture. It's about, we work with children, not machines, and every interaction there should be learning from it. Whether it's a good interaction or not so good interaction, there's always learning from it.
Cheers, Dave. Another question that's coming through the chat is from Sally, wondering if you could reflect back on any experience of supporting a small number of children and young people. I think you said that your setting was 12 bedded, but I don't know if in the past have you got any insights into how best to support children and young people who are in a smaller setting, because there is a risk that they feel as if they're quite isolated?
Yeah, I think it is around. So one of the biggest concerns for me around secure care is more to do with transitions. So where they're going to next, because it is at the end of the day, it is a period in their life where they lodge somewhere. So part of the process. So I'm looking to close Lincolnshire Secure and working with DFE on grant funding to open a 28-bedded secure children's home. But the 28 beds will be 4 6-bedded homes and a 4-bedded home. The 6-bedded homes will be 4 and 2, 4 and 1 plus 1, depending on the needs and the complexity of the children that is coming at that time. But there will be homes. So it is about having, encouraging family where appropriate to come and have contact with their child, making those really positive experiences, making that time with the children a really positive experience. And I think I have a number of children that say to me, this is the best Christmas I've ever had. And yet they're locked up. But is that a sad indictment on society? and the lack of support that that child's received within their short life. And as corporate parents, we have a duty to support those children and provide them with those opportunities to be children, regardless of why they're placed with us.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Another question that's coming through the chat is regarding the recruitment of non-qualified staff. I suppose, what mechanisms do you have in place, or sort of policies or practices to support them into gaining the necessary qualifications for registration? I suppose I'll add that as a kind of broader question, been around for a while, but are those minimum qualifications, in your opinion, a barrier to a otherwise successful candidate or member of staff continue to practice?
I think there can be a barrier. I did a whole piece of work with another secure children's home who was really struggling to recruit, and then they said to me, but we won't take staff unless they've got A to C in Maths and English. And my question back was, what having a to C in Maths and English makes you a good carer with the children, makes you able to work with children? I don't understand it. I'm not interested in that. Yes, it might help you write a good report, and it might help you count to 10, but actually, does it help you work with children? I'd like to be challenged by somebody who says to me, you've got to have that and it makes you a really good carer, because I completely disagree. I think we can assist staff who have limited report writing skills and maybe who struggle academically, but actually you can do that because we all employ full-time teachers. So James didn't have Maths and English and attended school with the children and did his Maths and English with the children in school. And that empowered him. Well, it didn't disempower him, that empowered him with the children, because the children saw him sat next to them learning Maths and English.
It's an interesting approach. Thanks for that, Dave. I've got two questions. One came in from Francis, and the question is, who looks after you? And I'm assuming that's the question directed at you, as you're the kind of leader of the secure care environment. And then I'll pop in after that, unless you have another question.
Okay, yeah. So for me, I would say is my peers within the Secure Children's Zone Secure Accommodation Network. So it's the other 13 Secure Children's Zones managed, I would say, is my biggest support. On top of that, I can access the psychology within my health team. And then I have a manager within Lincolnshire County Council who does my direct supervision. So I'm well supported.
That's great. And I suppose that may be a nice point to dovetail some of the support that we can offer practitioners in Scotland. Here at CYCJ, we have two different forums that if you work in secure care or on the edges of secure care, you're welcome to come along to. We've got the Secure Care Champs Board, which is looking at the implementation and success of the secure care standards, but also the Secure Care Practitioners Forum. So if you're an area social worker, a residential worker, secure care worker, you're free to come along to that. So if you get in touch with Ruby Whitelaw, who will just put an email in the chat very shortly, she'll be very welcome to happy to welcome you along to the next one. And I suppose, Dave, if I can just pose the question that I posed to Caroline and Stefan earlier on regarding the role and the purposes of secure care, it seems, depending on how you're looking at it, it's serving a variety of different roles. Is that a hindrance or a help for you in terms of retention and recruitment of staff?
It's not. We're all a national resource, so the fact that children come and spend a period of time with us in their lives and then they move on, it means you're forever moving. So if you get a child in that is very complex at the start and then you work with them and they move on as part of their journey, I think that assists with retention rather than it. I think secure care is, from a staff's perspective, you either get staff that come in and will work here 6 to 9 months and they leave because it's not for them, or they come in and they stay for a long time.
That's great, Dave. Thanks very much for your answering all those questions. So just to conclude, because I know that I've got a number of practitioners on the line, so thank you all for giving up your time to come along to join us, and I hope you've enjoyed the different presentations. Finally, on behalf of CYCJ, can I thank Emma, Dave, Stefan and Caroline for giving up your really important and precious times, and I hope that you can keep in touch with us over the next few months. For those that you attended, please do use the Padlet to keep in touch with us and sign up to the CYCJ newsletter, where you hear news of Caroline's article when it's brought out, Emma's phase 4 when we get to that, and any other news about secure care. So thanks a lot for coming along, and we'll catch you later on. Cheers.